What if I told you that everything you thought you knew about life, death, and the afterlife was just the surface of a much greater reality? What if I told you that beyond this world, beyond the distractions of our daily lives, lies a truth so powerful, so undeniable, that once you glimpse it, you can never return to the person you were before? This is not just a story, this is a warning. A Muslim man, devout, committed to his faith, dies and crosses into the realm of the unseen. What he experiences will shake him to his core. He sees the Barzakh Realm, witnesses the fate of souls, and encounters a truth that many ignore until it is too late. But unlike most, he is given a second chance. He returns with a message. But here's the real question. Will you listen? Will you wake up before it's too late? Or will you continue living as if you have forever? Before we dive into this powerful and life-changing experience, take a moment to subscribe to this channel. Many of you watch these videos but haven't subscribed yet. Don't miss out on more eye-opening content that can change the way you see your faith, your life, and your purpose. Hit that subscribe button now, because today we're going to unveil mysteries that have been explained through Islam, but so many have ignored. And now let's begin. A life rooted in Islam. My earliest memories are soaked in the rhythm of faith. Before I even knew who I was, I knew who I belonged to. Allah, the most merciful, the most wise. I was born into a family where Islam wasn't just a belief, it was the very fabric of our existence. I remember waking up to the soft, rhythmic recitations of the Quran echoing through our home. My father's deep voice, my mother's whispered du'as. It was a world of devotion, where every action, every moment, was tied to something greater than ourselves. Before I could even read, I had memorized words that would shape my soul forever. La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. There is no deity worthy of worship but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger. Simple words, yet they held a power I would come to understand only much later. As a child, I never questioned faith. It was as natural as breathing. Islam was my guiding star, my foundation, my unshakable truth. But even then, something inside me was always searching for more. I remember standing under the night sky, staring into the vast darkness speckled with light, feeling something indescribable stir within me. A presence, a pull from the unseen, as though the universe itself was whispering secrets that only the soul could hear. I often wondered, who are we really? What lies beyond this fleeting life? What happens the moment we close our eyes for the last time? I had read about the Barzakh Realm, the in-between state where souls await the final judgment. But I wanted to feel it, to know it beyond mere words. I craved an experience that would shake me, that would make me see. Even as I grew older, my faith remained strong. I prayed, I fasted, I gave in charity. I did everything a good Muslim should do. But deep down, a quiet voice began to whisper, "Am I doing enough? Will my deeds be accepted? What if I die today? Am I truly ready?" These thoughts didn't leave me. They followed me in my prayers, in my quiet moments, in the stillness of the night. The concept of life after death became more than just something I heard in khutbahs. It became a reality I could almost touch. I became fascinated by stories of near-death experiences, NDEs, of people who had crossed the threshold and returned with visions of the afterlife. Some saw beauty beyond imagination, while others saw horrors that shook them to their core. What if, in my arrogance, I had misunderstood the very faith I was so certain of? I knew I had to seek answers, to deepen my understanding. So I buried myself in books, listening to scholars, devouring every piece of knowledge I could find. I read about Islamic mysticism, about those who had transcended the ordinary and touched the realm of the unseen. I studied the prophecies and signs of the last day, trying to connect them to the world unfolding around me. I sought out teachers, engaged in deep theological discussions, always searching for that missing piece. But no matter how much I learned, there was always this ache inside me, this longing for something real, something beyond intellect, an experience that would awaken my soul. And then it happened, a test that would change my life forever. The Quran says, "And we will surely test you with something of fear and hunger, and a loss of wealth and lives and fruits, but give good tidings to the patient. Surah Al-Baqarah 2:155. I never truly understood this ayah until I lived it. I had no idea that my search for truth was about to take me to the very edge of existence, that soon I would stand at the door between this life and the next, that I would die, cross into the unknown, and return with a knowledge that would shake me to my core. 2. Moments of doubt and theological questions. They say faith is like a fortress, unshakable when built on strong foundations. But what they don't tell you is that even the strongest walls can tremble under the weight of a single question. I had lived my life certain of Allah, certain of the Quran, certain that my deeds would lead me to Jannah. But certainty is a fragile thing. It only takes a whisper, a fleeting doubt, a single moment of hesitation to plant a seed that grows in the deepest corners of your mind. And so it happened to me. I remember the first time I felt it. It wasn't some grand crisis of faith, no thunder striking from the sky, no voice shaking the earth beneath my feet. It was small, just a thought creeping in at the edges of my consciousness. What if I'm not good enough? What if, despite all my prayers, my fasts, my devotion, what if I still fall short? The Quran speaks of the mercy of Allah, but it also speaks of His justice. I had always believed that my deeds would be my salvation, that if I prayed enough, fasted enough, gave enough in charity, then my place in the hereafter would be secure. But the more I studied, the more I realized, no one is guaranteed salvation. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him himself, said, "None of you will enter paradise by his deeds alone, but only by the mercy of Allah." Sahih Muslim 28:16. That terrified me. And then came the bigger questions, the ones I was afraid to even say out loud. What happens at the moment of death? What does the soul truly experience? The Quran speaks of the Barzakh Realm, the waiting place between this life and the next. But I wanted to understand it beyond mere words. I had heard of people who had experienced near-death experiences, NDEs, some who saw light, peace, and beauty, and others who saw terror, darkness, and suffering. Could those visions be real? And if so, what did that mean for me? I began to obsess over these questions, reading stories, watching testimonies, searching for patterns that could explain what awaited us beyond the veil. Have you ever experienced a spiritual shift, that moment when everything you once believed seems to blur at the edges? That was where I found myself, caught between knowledge and uncertainty, between faith and fear. And then there was something else, something I was almost ashamed to admit. Christianity. I had always dismissed it, seeing its beliefs as flawed, its concept of salvation as irrational. But as I engaged in discussions with Christians, I found myself struggling, not because I believed in their faith, but because their certainty unsettled me. They spoke of grace, of salvation, not through deeds, but through faith alone. It seemed too easy, too convenient, and yet, deep down, I envied their certainty. I envied the way they spoke of their afterlife with absolute confidence. Was I missing something? Had I misunderstood the mercy of Allah? These thoughts haunted me. But I could not let doubt fester. Islam had always been my anchor, and I knew that the answers lay within its depths. So I turned back to the Quran, to the words of the Prophet, to the scholars who had walked this path long before me. And what I found was profound, and they ask you about the soul. Say, "The soul is of the affair of my Lord, and you have not been given knowledge except a little." Surah Al-Isra 1785. This was the answer. Not everything could be known, not everything needed to be explained. Faith was not about having all the answers. It was about trusting in the one who did. But I would not have time to fully make peace with these thoughts, because my life was about to take a turn I never expected. A moment was coming that would erase all doubt, that would force me to confront the very reality of life after death. And I was completely unprepared for it. 3. A near-death experience. You never really expect it. The moment when your life, everything you've ever known, comes to an abrupt halt. Death is always something distant, something that happens to other people, in other places, at other times. But that day, death came for me. And in those moments, I saw things I cannot unsee, things that shattered every doubt, every hesitation, every question I had ever held about the unseen world. It started as an ordinary day. I had been visiting family, enjoying the warmth of loved ones, the comfort of familiar faces. There was laughter, conversation, the smell of fresh bread in the air. But then, out of nowhere, it struck. A pain so sharp it stole the breath from my lungs. At first I ignored it, brushing it off as nothing more than fatigue. But within minutes it became unbearable. A crushing weight pressed against my chest, my vision blurred, and my body felt as though it was no longer mine. My family's voices became distant, panicked shouts echoing around me. Then, just like that, everything went black. I don't know how long I was gone, but in that moment, I was no longer in the world I had known. I felt myself rise, as if being pulled from my own body. I looked down and saw myself, my lifeless form, doctors working frantically, my family crying. It was the strangest thing, to be there yet not be there. And then, it happened. A shift. A pulling force, as though I was being drawn towards something unseen, something vast. I could feel it, a presence, a reality beyond this reality. And before I could resist, I was no longer in the hospital. I was somewhere else entirely. I found myself standing in an unfamiliar place, a realm unlike anything in this world, the Barzakh Realm. It was neither the world of the living nor the final hereafter, but something in between. The air felt heavy, charged with an energy I could not comprehend. I could hear voices, whispers, cries, prayers being uttered in languages I did not recognize. I saw figures, some radiant with light, others shrouded in darkness. I knew, without needing to be told, that this was the place of waiting, where souls reside until the day of judgment. I was no longer a mere believer hearing about it. I was there. Then something even more terrifying happened. I felt a presence approaching, one I could not see, but I could feel its weight, its authority. And though no words were spoken, I knew what it was: the angels of death. I had read about them in the Quran, in the Hadiths, but now I was face to face with the very reality of what I had only imagined. One of them spoke, not in words, but directly into my soul. It asked me the question every soul will be asked upon departing this world: who is your Lord? My mind raced, my heart pounded. Though I no longer had a body, I could feel the trembling of my soul. Would I answer correctly? Would I be counted among the righteous, or was I about to face something far worse? At that moment, I realized something profound. Everything I had feared, everything I had doubted, everything I had questioned, it was real. The unseen world, the day of judgment, the consequences of our actions. It was not just theology, it was truth, and I was standing on the very threshold of that truth. Then, just as suddenly as it began, I felt another shift, a pulling sensation as though being yanked backward through time and space. The voices faded, the realm of the unseen disappeared, and I was falling, plummeting back into the world of the living. My eyes snapped open and I gasped, my lungs filling with air as if I had been drowning. I was back. The doctors stared in shock. My family wept in disbelief. But I knew I had seen the other side, and nothing would ever be the same again. 4. Oh, divine encounter. When I woke up, everything felt different. My body was weak, my chest ached, and my mind was foggy from whatever the doctors had given me. But none of that mattered. I had just returned from something far greater than a near-death experience. It was a glimpse into the unseen reality, a truth I could no longer ignore. My family surrounded me, their faces a mixture of relief and awe, but I barely heard their voices. My heart was still racing, my soul still trembling. Because in that moment I realized I had died. I had stepped beyond the veil and come back, and I wasn't alone. As I drifted in and out of consciousness, something strange happened. I felt a presence in the room, something unseen but unmistakably there. It wasn't like before when I had encountered the angels of death. It was different. This was radiant, overwhelming, unlike anything I had ever experienced. It felt like light itself had taken form, wrapping around me with a warmth I had no words to describe. And then a voice, clear, commanding, yet filled with an indescribable mercy. It did not speak in words, yet I understood every syllable as if they were carved into my very soul. "Oh soul, do you understand now? Do you see what was always before you?" I couldn't respond. I wanted to, but my tongue, my body, my very being felt unworthy of speech. In that moment, every arrogance I had ever held, every doubt I had entertained, every moment I had thought myself knowledgeable, all of it crumbled. I was nothing. A mere breath in the vastness of creation, a soul suspended between divine mercy and justice. And yet, despite my insignificance, this presence, whatever it was addressing me. Then came the vision. It wasn't like a dream, nor like something I could explain in worldly terms. It was as if my soul itself had been lifted and transported to another realm. I saw the angels, ranks upon ranks, standing in submission before the throne of Allah. I saw the souls of the righteous, bathed in light, awaiting their eternal reward. And then I saw something else. The souls of the lost, those who had turned away, trapped in darkness, pleading, regretting, knowing that their time had run out. The weight of it crushed me. I had always believed, always known of these realities, but now I had seen them. And once you see, you can never unsee. The presence spoke again. You were given knowledge, yet you questioned. You were shown signs, yet you hesitated. Now you have seen with your own eyes. What will you do with what has been given to you? I felt my soul tremble. This was not just about me, it was about all of us. How many of us live our lives as if we will never die? As if the next life is distant, theoretical, something to think about later. But there is no later, there is only now. And what we do now shapes what comes next. The vision faded, the light withdrew, and I found myself back in my hospital bed gasping for breath. The machines beeped frantically, the doctors rushed to stabilize me, my family cried in relief. But I was no longer the same man. I had been given something rare, something powerful, a glimpse behind the curtain, a chance to return with knowledge few are ever granted. But what was I supposed to do with it? How could I, a mere human, carry the weight of what I had just witnessed? I closed my eyes, and a single verse from the Quran echoed in my mind. And we will show them our signs in the horizons and within themselves, until it becomes clear to them that it is the truth. Surah Fussilat 41:53. I had been shown the signs. The question was, would I act upon them? 5. Visions of the human destiny and truth. The days after my return felt surreal, as if I were walking in two worlds at once. My body was here in this realm, yet my soul had been somewhere else, somewhere I couldn't forget no matter how much I tried. The weight of what I had seen in the Barzakh Realm pressed upon me. Every breath, every heartbeat, every moment felt borrowed. I had seen what awaits us. I had stood at the threshold of eternity and come back. But why? Why had I been given this glimpse, this knowledge that so few are granted? Sleep became a stranger to me. Every time I closed my eyes, the visions returned, the radiant souls who lived in the light of Allah's mercy, the tormented ones who cried out in regret, the angels, the vast expanse of existence beyond this world. I saw the signs everywhere now, in the smallest details of life. A bird taking flight reminded me of the souls being lifted. The silence of the night reminded me of the stillness of the grave. The sunrise felt like the day of judgment creeping closer. Nothing felt ordinary anymore. And then something even stranger happened. I began seeing the same signs in the people around me. It was as if I could sense the weight of their souls. Some people radiated light, an aura of tranquility, of remembrance. Others seemed burdened, trapped in a fog of heedlessness, their souls unaware of the reality awaiting them. I watched as people chased after this world, money, power, distractions, completely blind to how quickly it would all be taken away. I wanted to grab them by the shoulders and say, "Wake up. You have no idea what's coming. You have no idea how real it all is." But would they listen? Would they understand? Had they ever experienced a spiritual shift? The Quran tells us, "Every soul shall taste death, and we test you with evil and with good as a trial, and to us you will be returned." Surah Al-Anbiya 21:35. This verse haunted me now. Death was not something abstract. It was real, and I had been on the brink of it. And what lay beyond death was not a mystery. It was a certainty. But how many people lived as if they had forever? How many of us ignore the warnings, the prophecies, the signs? I thought back to the souls I had seen, the ones who had been at peace. What had set them apart? It wasn't their wealth, their status, their achievements in this world. It was something deeper, something unseen. They had lived with sincerity, with awareness of Allah, with hearts untainted by the distractions of dunya. And the tormented ones? They were not all the tyrants and oppressors of the world. Some had simply lived in heedlessness, ignoring the truth, delaying repentance, assuming they had more time. But time had run out. I knew then that I couldn't return to my old self. I couldn't live the way I had before, not after what I had seen. I had been given a second chance, and with it, a responsibility. The weight of it pressed upon me, but I knew this was not a burden. It was a gift, a chance to change, a chance to prepare, a chance to warn. But what was I supposed to do now? How could I possibly return to normal life when I had glimpsed eternity? And more importantly, how much time did I have left before death came for me again? 6. The decision and the return. I had returned, but I was not the same man. How could I be? I had seen the veil lifted, had walked the path that every soul must eventually take. I had been given a second chance, a mercy that I could not take for granted. But now came the real test. What would I do with this knowledge? Would I fall back into the habits of my old life, numbing myself with distractions? Or would I change, truly change, and live in a way that reflected what I had seen? For the first few days, I was silent. My family spoke to me, asked me what had happened, but I couldn't put it into words. How do you explain something like this? How do you tell people that you have seen the unseen, that you have stood on the doorstep of death and returned? They would never understand. And so, I kept it to myself. I needed time to process, to absorb the weight of it all. But deep inside I knew I could not keep this experience buried forever. It had been shown to me for a reason. I spent my days in deep reflection. I revisited the Quran, searching for answers, trying to find meaning in what I had been given. And the words hit me in a way they never had before. Has the time not come for those who have believed that their hearts should become humbly submissive at the remembrance of Allah and what has come down of the truth? Surah Al-Hadid 57:16. The time had come. For too long, I had assumed I was safe, that my prayers, my fasting, my outward practice of Islam were enough. But now I knew the truth. Faith is not just rituals. It is a state of the heart, a way of being, a full submission to the reality of Allah and the hereafter. And I had been living with one foot in this world and one foot in the next, never fully committing. That had to change. So I made a decision. I would live every day as if it were my last. I would no longer delay, no longer make excuses. I would pray with sincerity, not just out of habit. I would seek knowledge not just to debate, but to transform my soul. I would treat every person I met as if it were our last conversation before the day of judgment. Because the truth is, we never know when that moment will come. And then, I knew what I had to do. I had to share what I had seen. Not to gain recognition, not to impress people with my story, but to wake them up before it was too late. If even one soul could be reminded, if even one person could turn back to Allah because of what I had experienced, then perhaps my return had not been in vain. I looked at myself in the mirror, truly seeing myself for the first time. Omar, a man who had died, seen the truth, and been given another chance. I whispered a prayer. "O Allah, do not let me waste this gift. Guide me to live in a way that pleases you. Let my final breath be one of faith. And when my time truly comes, let me be among those who are at peace." The journey was not over. In fact, it was only just beginning. What's next? This was my story. But now, I ask you, what about yours? Have you ever experienced a moment that shook your soul, that made you question everything? Have you experienced a spiritual shift? Maybe you haven't had a near-death experience, but deep down, you feel that pull. the one calling you to something greater. This is your sign. This is your wake-up call. Do not wait. Do not assume you have more time. Because when death comes, it does not send a warning. It does not ask for permission. It arrives, and in that moment, there are no second chances. So I ask you now, what will you do with the time you have left? You've heard the story. You've walked through the journey of a man who died, crossed into the unseen, and returned with a truth so powerful that it changed everything. But now the real question is, what will you do with this knowledge? You see, most people will hear something like this and move on, distracted by the next thing in their lives. But some will stop. Some will reflect. Some will take this as the wake-up call they needed. Which one will you be? Have you ever experienced a spiritual shift, a moment when your soul whispered that there's more to this life? This is that moment. This is your sign to turn back to Allah before it's too late. Because one day you won't have a second chance. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment below. What are your thoughts? Have you ever had a moment that made you question everything? Let's start a conversation, because faith is not just something we practice alone, it's something we strengthen together. And before you go, make sure to subscribe so you never miss another video that could change your life. Turn on notifications because the next video, well, let's just say it might reveal something even more shocking than what you heard today. This is the veil of the unseen, and I'll see you in the next one. Assalamu alaikum.